So first of all, I'll welcome you at TÉLUQ Université. We're part of Université du Québec. And so we're organizing this second day of the conference. So I want to welcome you all. What we're going to do is we're going to have a certain number of presentations up front. And after each block of 4 presentations, we'll have a discussion and questions and comments with people in the room. So without going on any longer, I'll let Lorenzo present the general concept and theme of the conference.
It's a great pleasure to be here. And again, thank you, Diane, for doing all of this for us. It's an incredible time. I'm sure we're going to have a great time to hear all the speakers today. We have a big line of speakers, mainly from Montreal, which is interesting. I just wanted to go back on the general idea of this project. On general idea of this project. So this project is coming from an AHRC research project, which means Arts and Humanities Research Council. And this project has been developed by Paul Rogers, Paul Jones, and Amarish Chakrabarty, which are my research partners. We've been working around this since about 1 year, and we already had a similar workshop in India, in Bangalore, and we had another one in UK at Northumbria University. So the idea behind the research and this workshop is pretty much to do some research behind creativity and how this is facilitated, cultivated, exploited, and how this is somehow related with local culture. As you can see, we took somehow, we are digging somehow in the culture of creativity in Canada, UK, and India. And I think choosing in particular Montreal was particularly important because Montreal is the UNESCO city of creativity, so that's quite important for us. It's a French speaking city within an Anglophone country, so it's even more complex and interesting how this is developed. So in the contrast and the contradiction and in the complexity, there's something interesting to look at. We try somehow to address a number of questions during these symposiums, which is how might creativity be adequately conceptualized in a design context? What role do cultural organizations, national bodies play in harnessing creativity? Do more effective environments and approaches for facilitating creativity exist? What design skills, knowledge, and expertise are required for creativity? And what are the key drivers that motivate the creativity and innovation of designers and other stakeholders? Are they economical, cultural, social, political, technological, or something else? And now, we've been sending to each of you a sort of form we kindly ask you to fill with the picture. There are 2 forms. One is about what is creative from your point of view. So we're asking you somehow to post a picture in the form and to motivate it in a way with a short abstract. So we want to know from you what is creative and what is innovative. So we already received a number of forms from each of the people, from the speakers and also the attendees. So if you haven't done so, please do it in the next few days. We have a huge number, a long list of people that are somehow collaborating, speaking, and working for these 2 days events. We had people yesterday, we pretty much focused on Canada as a country. So we had people from the West, people, of course, from the East, from Toronto, from Vancouver, and of course from Montreal. Today we're focusing mainly on Montreal as a creative city. So we're pretty much trying to understand how much creativity somehow is, can have a role in the economy of the city and in the development of the local economy. So this is pretty much the scheduling of the second day. As you can see, this is divided into halves. The first half, which is in the morning, which is in English. We invited a number of people from Marie-Josée Lacroix, Marie-Pier Veilleux, Nadia Lakhdari, Francis Gosselin, Éric Bourget, Karim Vallot, Hélène Brown, and Philippe Demers. I apologize for my very bad French pronunciation. So really, I mean, I mean, even English is not my mother language. So I'm sure you can apologize me. And the second half is going to be in French, and I think also this is important because it's a French-speaking city. So we have a number of discussants which will display a number of different projects related to creativity in Montreal. So I really wish that you will stay for the overall day. The idea is having, as Diane already said, we're having 2 quarters, then a final discussion, plenary discussion all together, where we hope to somehow to address your question after every 4 speakers. Having said that, I would like to invite Diane again. I would like to thank you, Diane, for the great job she's been doing. She was an incredible, wonderful chair and collaborator. I really wish we can keep on collaborating. Something which is important to say is that at the end of the day, Diane is launching a new program at TÉLUQ, which is also somehow instrumental. This symposium is somehow instrumental also to the launch of this program. Thank you, Diane.
Okay, so we'll get started. Well, I'm going to take part of the thanks, but I also will thank Laurent, who's somewhere in the room, I think, unless he's still maybe up front. But I want to thank Laurent also, who contacted many of you and who also did a lot of work for the organization. One little thing, if people have phones, make sure that they're not going to be ringing, because as you see, we are filming precisely for the course, which is called Gestion de Projets créatifs. It's a new course that we have developed. We call it's a short program. It's a second level at the master's level. Eventually, it will be put together with other programs to create a master's. But for the moment, we already have 5 courses in management of creative projects. And I think most of you got the information up front. But if you didn't, you can pick up a paper which gives the information. The program is available. It's just starting now. So we're waiting for tons of students. So we're going to start with the first presentation. The first presentation is the presentation of Marie-Josée Lacroix. As we mentioned this morning, we're going to be talking mainly of the role of creativity, the role of creative sectors in development, but also particularly the role of economic organizations and cultural organizations, how they can contribute to develop creativity and contribute to develop local development. So we'll have these presentations and then we'll open up the floor for a more general discussion. So Marie-Josée Lacroix is at the City of Montreal, and she's at a design commissioner, the Bureau de Design of the City of Montreal. And she has been working there on all these types of issues for a certain number of years. So we're very glad to have her to present what is done in the City of Montreal.
First, I would like to thank you, all of you, La Sapienza, Concordia, and TÉLUQ, for this nice invitation to share with you our action plan at the City of Montreal. I already apologize because I will be reading my lecture in order to be faster, because I am extremely enthusiastic and I tend to speak much more than what I'm supposed to. So, first, I would like maybe to just precise what we mean by design. In fact, we include the Design Bureau, and the City of Montreal includes in its definition. We do define design in its broader sense, including all the creative disciplines that shape and have the power of qualifying and enriching our living environment. Therefore, design for us includes landscape architecture, urban design, graphic design, interior. I also have a colleague who's a commissioner for fashion, but it's not within the Design Bureau. It's within the entrepreneur section, but it's not part of the Design Bureau. So why, in fact, should a city be interested in design? Because I would say store windows, park layouts, urban furniture, signage, bicycle, concert hall, residential complexes, bridges, all these elements that make a city, they are designed. They could be well designed or badly designed. And they have a huge impact that could be positive or negative on the experience and perception of the city one lives in, works, or visits. So the city and the public sector should lead by example and be demanding in terms of design and architecture on its territory. But beyond that duty, the city can get a huge benefit from good design in terms of differentiation, attractiveness, and competitiveness in an age when cities are fiercely competing with each other. Our bureau focuses mainly on projects that have a strong public dimension. Good design is a real public concern when it affects and interfaces with citizens' lives. So this is really our topic. The importance of design is not so much the direct economic weight of this sector, although Montreal has a huge concentration of talents. But, and I think, Marie-Pierre, you will be talking about this issue. But I think it's rather the impact that design and designers can have on the growth and competitiveness of all other industries, including the city itself, which makes this sector so strategic. Well, you can see it's about 25,000 jobs. I don't know if our figures fit with your figures, though, but anyway, we have to. I must say that these statistics have to be evaluated. Yes, exactly. But I think which is absolutely still true is that at least 2/3 of Quebec designers live in Montreal, which means that we have a huge concentration of talents here. Since creating the position of design commissioner in 1991, it was almost 25 years ago, and therefore quite before the concept of creative economy and creative city brought by Charles Landry and Richard Florida became trendy. The City of Montreal has supported the promotion and development of several initiatives that encourage designers to get involved in the city's economic and cultural development. I think Montreal was quite visionary and a pioneer in getting into supporting this creative industry. Through its design of the City of Design Integrated Action Plan, the Design Bureau, created in 2006, aims at opening opportunities for designers in Montreal by initiating and supporting urban design and architecture projects, and developed a shared appreciation for architecture and design through awareness raising and educational initiatives aimed at citizens, businesses, and also elected officials, which are key people. Basically, the mission of our small team of 7 experts, totally and exclusively dedicated to design promotion within the city's Department of Economic Development, is to improve the quality of the city's experience with the help of designers, provide guidance and support for public commissions in design, and of course develop the market here and abroad for Montreal-based designers and promote their talents. I just would like to present my colleague. I just spoke about my team, but one of the 7 colleagues is here, Stéphanie Geoffroy, who's a design commissioner in the team also, and she's really involved with the UNESCO network. Okay, so now a few words on UNESCO City of Design, because I don't know if many people here knows about this UNESCO Creative Cities Network and how a city is appointed and what it means really. So I would like to spend just a few moments to explain it because it's quite important. In 2006, UNESCO has recognized the richness of our assets, talents, institutions, and our commitment, I would say our determination, even since 1991, as you just saw, to build and develop one of these assets. Montreal as a city of designer is confirmed. 25,000 designers. It's an asset to be preserved. Montreal City of Design is, however, emergent. It's a collective initiative. It's our aspiration. It should be seen as a project, not a consécration. Being a UNESCO City of Design is being a member in a network of creative cities. We're talking about 69 cities now, from 32 countries all over the world. And 16 out of the 69 were appointed in the design field. Cities have to choose among many creative industries which one they want to be developed more. And so you can be a city of music, gastronomy, digital, craft, literature. Montreal chose to be appointed, well, we applied in the design field. So it's a lifetime designation, provided that it is used as a lever for development and best practices are exchanged with other cities in the network. So it's important to know that this designation can be withdrawn. It comes with commitments from the city, but also from the community. So it was very difficult to explain because it's a new program. When we were appointed in 2006, we had a hard time to explain what it meant to be a UNESCO City of Design, because it's not being a worldwide design capital, not at all. As I just said, it's a project, it's an aspiration, and it's based on assets. But so I think the best way we found to explain is that UNESCO recognized that we were a city of designers. And this is really, and our goal is really to become a city of design by having all these talents contribute much more to the building and to the design of the city. So this is, I think, the best way to explain this project. In order to achieve this goal, our strategies are to ensure better recognition for designers, raise awareness of them, and especially provide work to them. The idea is to open up our domestic market to them in order to retain these creative forces to Montreal, benefit from their talents, and have them contribute much more to the future of the city. We really believe, as an institution, that being a better client for designers can help us better shape the city. So you can see here that, strategies are multiple: recognition, promotion, by design. I will go very quickly through all this, but very, very quickly, we're showing with some examples what we've been doing, what we are undertaking. So promote good design. A city of design necessarily promotes its talents. We all have to be extremely careful when we adopt slogans like Montreal, capital of this and of that. When we were appointed the UNESCO City of Design, the temptation for the mayors at that time and the elected official was great to use this title just for branding the city. Although it may be useful and important for consolidating a city's reputation, it must nevertheless reflect reality. A UNESCO City of Design should first promote design and designers as a lever to increase the city's attractiveness and the citizens' quality of life. So Commerce Design Montreal was created a long time before we were appointed, in 1995 actually, with the aim of convincing Montreal merchants and restaurants owners of the benefits of investing in the design quality of their premises with the help of qualified professionals. The intention of the awards is to foster the market for commercial design in Montreal as a way of enhancing the quality of the living environment, and making the city more attractive, making businesses more competitive, boosting local demand for professional commercial design services. So here few slides. This program has been extremely successful in developing and improving the overall design quality of retail and restaurants. We do organize a gala ceremony, and we promote 20 businesses equally, a diversity of businesses, because we do want to show that good design is multifaceted and plural. And all these ambassadors help us to convince others and to have a spin-off effect on other businesses. It's interesting to see that since 2003, the success of this Montreal initiative has inspired similar contests over the past decade. Nowadays, we have 14 different cities in Europe, Canada, and the States that have implemented this program with the help of the City of Montreal, which I think we can be proud of. Another activity that we rolled out to promote Montreal designers are Open House Design Montreal, where all designers are invited to open their offices to the public, kids, and everything. So it's a very good way to educate and to be very pedagogic about design talents and design disciplines. Of course, another very important responsibility, a city of design, is also about souvenir items. We use our purchasing power to encourage local creativity. The Code Souvenir gift items catalog is the primary lever available to public sectors bodies for supporting our designers. So we did this boutique at C2 MTL, which was a great success also, to promote designers that are offering objects, souvenir objects, designed here in Montreal and that represent Montreal. So these are, and I will finish by this section, which is, I think, very, very important. We have to put designers to work. Although we are not yet at the major stock-taking stage, there have been multiple calls for creative proposal to stimulate increased and higher quality participation by designers in the future of Montreal. We've been spending more than $6 million to just found and promote competitions, architecture and design competitions. To date, we've opened the market up to our designers by organizing projects competitions for libraries, bus shelter, recycling bins, sport complex, planetarium. All these public space squares, all projects that once completed will considerably enhance Montrealers' everyday living environment in the same way that other initiatives such as the Big C bike share system or Quartier des Spectacles district, both of which are nowadays emblematic of Montreal design excellence. So here are some projects. Libraries, this is a library that in Saint-Laurent, done by Pelletier and Cardinal, the drawings and the realizations. These are real legacy, and the Design City is about having concrete legacy on the territory of very, very good and high quality architecture and design. This is the library in Rosemont, Marc Favreau. You have the drawing and the realization. This is a very interesting little square. It was a $1 million project, very small, so we could have done a simple, a public call for tender instead of a competition, but we thought it would be good. And because of this competition, Nip Paysage, a young landscape architecture firm, was able to have their very first commission by the City of Montreal. So the way we proceed to procure is really important to retain the talents in Montreal. That's the garbage bin, recycling bin. And this is to show that when a city decides to encourage innovation, it takes risk. And on the left side, this was the winning concept of the competition. But after we tested the prototype, we couldn't really, it would have cost really a lot of money to develop further. Although we really love this design, we decided to change and to radically be much more conservative and design the other one. So I thought it was interesting to show you that innovation, means risk, and a city has to be aware of that. And these last pictures are installations, luminotherapy in Quartier des Spectacles, and I wanted to show you that because when we started to work with Quartier des Spectacles, they said, oh no, we don't need competitions. We know all these people that are extremely good at installations, lighting, and we don't need, no. And we said, oh, let's try. And in the end, they discovered many, many talents. From 2011, we started, and every year we are doing luminotherapy and video projection competitions. And thanks to this annual competition, many, many young architects, designers, lighting, scenographers were able to be discovered and have a commission and use this fantastic laboratory to show their talent. So we do hope by participating in this kind of event, we already are part of many networks, and we do exchange best practices with many cities. We learn a lot from others. We inspire some. And we are looking forward to really pursue this exchange, international exchange, and local exchange, of course. Thanks for, I hope I was on time. That's okay? Okay.
Yes, so hi, everybody. So as I'm from the Board of Trade, be sure that we're going to talk about money this morning, but not only. So as you all know, because you're here today, Montreal is world famous for its vibrant culture and creativity. When we think of culture and creativity, we think of examples such as, well, Arcade Fire, of course, the fashion scene, the circus arts. We think of big exhibition that have traveled the world, like the Jean-Paul Gaultier exhibition that took place in the Fine Art Museum a few years ago. We think of our festivals, of course, and Place des Festivals and Le Quartier des Spectacles. IMAX is from Montreal. Other big exhibitions like Star Wars, Identities. We think of, well, yes, Cirque du Soleil, Cirque Éloise, Le Sept Doigts de la Main, Moment Factory. What else? Well, Xavier Dolan, of course. Big creative events like C2 Montreal, and you'll have the chance to hear Nadia speak about that later on, and it's amazing. We have a huge video games, as you know, too. So this is all part of the cultural and creative sectors. So that being said, I mean, I could go for hours giving examples, but let's go straight to our subject. So why is the Board of Trade involved in culture? So for 10 years now, we made one of our objectives to support and promote Montreal's culture and creativity. So over the years, we have published several economic impact studies and practical guides to help the artists and the business community to come closer. So for example, in one guide, we tell business people how they can get involved in culture, of course, by philanthropy, but also by giving time on boards. So we give really specific examples. We share best practices to encourage the business community to get involved in culture. We also have a website called Montréal Art à Faire. We did this website with our partner from the Conseil des Arts de Montréal. And each year for 10 years now, with the Conseil des Arts de Montréal, we also give awards to the business people to recognize their implication and positive impact in the cultural sector. So this is called les Prix Art à Faire. So we do quite a lot, I think, for Chamber of Commerce, but why does the business community get involved in culture? Of course, there are several rational reasons behind this interest. And I will get to them in a moment. But first, I would like to talk about the emotional factors which give such a high importance to those sectors. Well, culture and creativity contribute to our city's well-defined personality. So on the international stage, Montreal is considered as one of the world's hippest city, the best destination for LGBT tourism, one of the best student cities. As you probably know, the Lonely Planet selected us as one of the best summer cities, not winter, but summer. We are overall one of the best places to live. So all those assets help Montreal distinguish itself from other large cities. And of course, it brings people from all over the world, but it makes also us proud of our city. So this is for all those reasons, Montreal stands out in the crowd. And yes, Montreal, as you probably know, Montreal is a woman. So we have determined here that Montreal is a woman. So you might have seen some publicity. More in the past, we don't see them that much anymore, but from Tourisme Montréal. And it was always à la Montréal. So Montreal is definitely a woman. We can talk about that later if you don't agree, but it's a woman. Well, as I said, in the last 10 years, we have published like 3 studies on culture and one about the creative industries. But exactly what is it that we are talking about from the business community point of view when we are talking about Montreal's creative and cultural sectors? Well, in fact, we're talking about 2 sectors which are often overlapping. So there is indeed overlap between the 2 sectors, but there are also important distinctions between the 2. So if we look at culture first, here is the parameter. So I'll go with maybe the light. Here's the parameter that we used for our most recent study on culture that we published I think 3 or 4 months ago. So from the geographical point of view, we studied the census metropolitan area of Montreal, which is commonly called the Greater Montreal. So you might know, but if you don't, well, this area accounts for 54% of Quebec's GDP, and it includes almost 4 million people. And the cultural spheres included within our definition of culture are the performing arts, visual arts, literary creation and publishing, music and sound recording, heritage, TV and television and film, digital media, and design. And we also looked not only at creation and production, but also at distribution, presentation, and conservation. So with this study, we were able to prove what we probably here all already know, that there is absolutely no doubt that culture has a major impact on Montreal's economy. So here are some numbers. So in fact, we're talking about close to $11 billion generated with the by the cultural sector. So our numbers fit, Marie-Josée, for now. It does. Yeah, because it's 11 billion, so it's quite important. So this represents 6% of Montreal's GDP. The cultural sector in Greater Montreal accounts for nearly 83,000 jobs, which represents 70% of jobs in Quebec's cultural sector. So, yeah, so it works. I mean, it works. So it's almost twice as many jobs as in the aerospace industry or in the life science industry. You probably know that those 2 industries are really important for Montreal, but in the cultural sector, we have double as many jobs. So that means that 1 over 25 jobs in Montreal is in the cultural sector. So we would be probably 2 in the room working in the cultural sector. But the main question is, how much does an employee in Montreal's cultural sector earn? Well, the mean is $43,500, which means that the salaries in the cultural sector are slightly below the average of all Montreal's industry. Like for just that you know, the average for all industries is $46,800. So in the cultural sector, the average would be like $3,000 less a year. However, those we call the creative heart of the cultural sector, which mean the independent artists, others, performers, are living precariously. You probably know that already. So their average income is $23,500 a year, which is nearly 50% less than the sector's average. So that's a huge difference. But good news, over the last 15 years, the cultural sector has maintained a growth rate higher than the average of all industries. It has increased from less than 3% in 1998 to a bit more than 4% in 2013, in spite of the economic slowdown of the last year. So some and a lot of industries have decreased their growth in the last year, but not in the cultural sector. So there is light for the salaries too. Now let's have a look at the creative industries. Some of you might have noticed in my presentation that our definition of culture does not include disciplines such as architecture, advertising, or multimedia. And there is a good reason for that. This is because those disciplines are important elements of the creative sector. But what are the creative industries? Of course, always from the business community point of view. Well, they result from a strong interaction between the arts and the new technologies. When we were looking to define our creative industries for a study that we published 2 years ago, we looked at definitions adopted by other countries and regions around the world and selected the one developed by the United Kingdom in 1998. So here's the definition. This is actually the definition that is tending to emerge as the international standard. Well, we could discuss this definition. It's quite old. I mean, it's almost 20 years old, but this is the definition that we used for the study. But in other words, what it means is that the creative industries encompass the cultural industries, and they have also wider, like they cast a wider net. So it's just bigger than only the cultural industries. If we want to be more specific, the creative industries include the following subsectors: architecture and design, arts, multimedia and visual effects, media, fashion, and advertising. So some of those sectors are part of the cultural sector, but some are not, like advertising. Fashion wasn't in the cultural definition for our study. So there's also very important economic impacts of the creative industries. So as we just did with culture, we measured in 2013 the economic impacts of these industries for Montreal. So here are a few numbers again. So it's more than 91,000 jobs. They generate close to $9 billion, well, $8.6 billion in economic spin-off, and this represents close to 5% of Montreal's GDP. The jobs are quality position, and their growth has exceeded the metropolitan average over the past few years. Well, in fact, the employment growth of the creative industries has been twice that of the CMA's growth between 2007 and 2012. So that means that not only employment in the creative industries is growing, but that means also that these industries' weight in Montreal's economy is growing. So compared to the cultural industries, the creative industries represent less GDP, but more jobs and, of course, better paid jobs. I've just presented you with the straight economic facts regarding those two industries. However, there is no doubt that culture and creative industries are a source of great pride for Montreal and Montrealers. They contribute to our city's reputation on the national and the international stage. And there's a big potential for exports. And this is really something that we should focus on. Exportation is probably the key of more development and So as you can see, the impacts on culture and creativity appeal both our rational, economic, and emotional side. They define our city's personality, and they are part of the reasons why Montreal stands out in a crowd. They are what makes Montreal so special. So, and this is why for 10 years now, the Board of Trade of Metropolitan Montreal has been working to bring these sectors together with the business community. And this is why we have been promoting their importance through publications and public events. And this is why we will continue doing so in the future. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have to admit that I will probably change a little bit what I had planned to talk about because of what I heard earlier today. So C2 Montreal, for those of you who don't know us, is an event that has been in existence in Montreal since 2012. So we've had 4 editions so far, and the 5th edition is coming up now. C2 Montreal was really created for a variety of reasons. One reason was at the beginning of the event's journey, one of our founding partners, which is Cirque du Soleil, they were approached by a lot of people who were asking them about how do you manage creativity? How are you an organization with creativity or ideas as its main product? They were also being asked a lot to talks at business conferences or to have a participation. And what they found together with Sid Lee, an advertising agency from C2, who's the other founding partner, is that while there were a lot of events internationally that were talking about creativity and innovation, very few were actually creative or innovative in the way that they did it. So it was all talking about it in a very rational sphere, but people weren't experiencing creativity. When we know creativity is not something that can be solely rational or intellectualized, it has to be sometimes emotional and messy. So they thought there's a space there to create such an event where you could talk about creativity and innovation, but also experience it. Then they also thought that they looked into it and pretty much found out, if I'm very honest, that the business model for doing something like that didn't work. And so they started C2 Montreal as a nonprofit organization that was run by a collective of Montreal organizations. And the idea there was really to provide a platform for Montreal creativity and innovation to shine. So that's part of the logic. We normally don't tell people from outside of Montreal, but I'll share the secret today that part of the logic behind it is governments, for example, and business communities will spend a lot of money, resources, and efforts in going on trade missions where a group of business leaders will travel to Peru or to Hong Kong or to Taipei. So the logic was doing that reverse. So we call C2 a reverse trade mission, where you think, well, if you create something that is so attractive, the whole world will come and see you here, and they'll get to meet your startups and meet your leading companies and meet your artists and your creatives and see showcases of their work. So that was the logic behind creating C2. And now if I can get to my video, I will show you what it actually looked like from that initial idea.
We decided to refuse status quo. We decided to embrace change. We decided to take on a big collective risk to reinvent the business conference as we knew it.
And it's really that growing community of minds and of connections that is so special to us, and so important.
You must be, heads above everybody else, otherwise it's not going to succeed. So, great value and great quality. Do you think you can deliver that?
Creativity in the company really leads to innovative product. And sometimes it's not just about creativity, it's about randomness.
Personal expression is the new form of entertainment. That's where we are today. We love this selfification world. If you are a brand in the house and you're inside that private environment, that's an incredibly powerful place to be.
Giving doesn't just feel good, it's actually a really good business strategy. Your customers become your greatest marketers.
Marketing people warned me that by talking about political and environmental issues, I would alienate myself from companies that might want to sponsor my car. I said, screw you, watch me.
The important thing is to be as transparent as possible about what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're doing, and why you're doing it with other people. Otherwise, you're just a drive that didn't save.
In the next 10 years, materials will be the new software. We'll see less and less electronics. We'll see more and more biology.
Companies that have the top 10% in terms of employee satisfaction outperform the S&P 500 by 15.5%.
If you obey all the rules, you miss all the fun, and that's the thing we give a shit about, because consumers are the ones that are going to vote for why we should win. And enjoy the rest of your time at C2. It's been an absolute honor. Cheers.
This is what C2 Montreal is today.
It's so refreshing to have a conference like this. Congratulations.
So one thing I'd like to talk about is the definition of C2. What do the two C's stand for? So they stand for commerce and creativity and the intersection of the two. One thing we always feel at C2, now I'm reacting to a presentation that we heard earlier today, we never like the term creative industries. That's something that we really don't like. I understand cultural industries. I hate creative industries as a term or as a qualifier because creativity should exist in every industry. Elon Musk is a great creative. Steve Jobs was a great creative. And they don't work in industries that have ideas or creativity as its product, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be creative in whatever role that you have. So I've got a couple of stories here that will exemplify what we mean when we talk about creativity in a non-cultural or traditionally creative space. So the first story is a story of a surgeon who was performing open heart surgery. His job was especially hard because he was performing open heart surgery on children. And when you perform open heart surgery on children, the single greatest risk factor is how long the heart is open for. That is the one thing that you want to reduce as much as possible. So this doctor read all the literature. He's trying to find a way to make that time shorter, and he called the other hospitals and he asked around the world, what are you doing? What are other surgeons doing? And he found nothing. Everybody was doing the same thing as he was, which in his mind just wasn't good enough. And then he had this flash and this epiphany, and he called in engineers from Ferrari's Formula One team. Because he looked at this one image a Sunday morning when he was sitting at home, and he thought there is actually no difference between the pit in a Formula One race and an operating table. Everybody's trying to go through a certain number of motions as quickly as you possibly can. And then what he found out from their process is that in Formula One, each engineer has a job. Like if your job is to pull that wheel away, that's all you do. And it makes it a lot faster because there's no loss of time in between changing tasks and picking up different tools. So he brought in some of these ideas and he reduced the time of open heart surgery for children by over 30% with this inspiration. Another story is the story of this man called Simon Berry. So Simon was traveling to Africa, to some very, very poor and remote areas of Africa. And he saw that in villages there were a lack of very basic medical supplies like rehydration salts, things that are very, very simple and that could save lives. And when he asked, people said, it's not that we get the donations, we get the money, we get them sent, but it's just a distribution problem. We just can't get them to these remote villages to get access to them. And then he looked around and he thought, well, Coca-Cola makes it everywhere. And I'm sure it's something you've seen if you've traveled. There's not a place in the world where you can go, as remote as it is, that Coca-Cola doesn't make it to. And then he had this thought, and he created these packs of medicine that are shaped to fit in between the crates of Coca-Cola bottles. And the logic was, anywhere Coca-Cola goes, my medicine can now go. So in these two cases, we're talking about, we're talking about surgery and Formula One. We're talking about medication for remote areas and a Coca-Cola distribution network. So it's often when we try and describe what is creativity, our way of describing it as C2 is often like it's the goosebumps test. You can't say what it was, but you hear the story and you get the goosebumps and you think, why didn't anybody ever think of that before? It's so obvious when it feels like that natural and that obvious. A closer example here in Montreal I always felt like that about is a great project, actually a startup that grew through C2 is Lufa Farms, where they thought, well, everybody has these issues with buying local produce and local food. There's the issues that our cities are spreading out. What are we going to do? And then they saw the biggest real estate that was unused in cities was the rooftops of huge industrial buildings. And so they started building greenhouse production facilities for vegetables on top of these buildings. And you hear that story, and they went through a lot of problems. Everybody from the food industry was telling them it couldn't be done and it wouldn't work or it'd be too expensive. Well, they went through it and they did it. They're currently doing it and expanding the model. But it's one of these stories when once you hear it, you think, why didn't somebody think of this before? Because it just makes so much sense. So in all the stories that we've just described, these people were hugely creative. They were creative because they connected seemingly unconnected things together to create something new, which is pretty much the definition of creativity. You don't need to create new words to write poetry, and you don't need to find a new note to write music. You just need to assemble them in a new way that people hadn't seen previously. And that is something that is not solely reserved for the cultural industries. It's something that every business person should be doing more of, and trying to find the greater purpose or the good that they are building through doing that. So when I go back to talk about Montreal as a creative platform, which was part of the topic for today, I think there are amazing things we have here that allow us for that creativity to thrive. We have some challenges, and there are some things that we could do better as well. When I go back to, the common thread of the stories I shared, which was the connection of seemingly unrelated things, we really believe that for that to happen, we need times, places, and platforms where people from different backgrounds, different walks of life can meet, because that's when these ideas can collide and you can have a new output. So for example, one thing that is really great in Montreal is the size of the city is big enough so that you have cultural diversity and you have underground artists, and it's big enough for all of that vibrancy to happen, but it's not so big that all of the groups are isolated in silos. So one example we often are told is in Montreal, it actually is not that hard for the startup community to speak to the finance community or to large corporations. When people see what we do at C2, where we actually bring together, we have a number of competitions to bring startups, and there's a lot of matchmaking with established companies. We had a few years ago people from Digital Dumbo, which is a hub for startups in Brooklyn, and they were really amazed because they were saying, we don't talk to Wall Street, and we don't talk to the Upper East Side art patrons the way that this is happening here, where there's this ecosystem where people are actually speaking and developing joint projects together, which is really, really important. And it's a fact of looking at organizational size is definitely important. Ages is definitely important. I think we're all becoming more and more aware that it's really important to hear young people's voices because they have new and different ideas. I would argue that it's becoming equally important to make time and space for older people's views who are sometimes forgotten. Creativity doesn't have a best by date. It doesn't expire. Some people think, oh, at 5 you're at your most creative and it's all downhill from there. I would argue that that's not true. Picasso famously said he didn't hit a stride until he was 72. Albert Camus wrote Belle du Seigneur, one of the greatest novels in French literature, when he was 80. So there is no limitation at that end. So I feel like it's a question of opening up that scope of who we speak to and bringing people differently. Making time for students, so basically the one challenge I think I would give to ourselves as a city, but to whoever is in the room and whatever your endeavors are in the events that you organize or the people you bring together for collaborations, is to think, who is the underdog in your field and who is the underrepresented person? And now try and go and find these people and bring them to the table. So whether it's an event, whether it's a consultation group, who doesn't have a voice, and how can you make sure that these people come in and are heard? And that is where you will find your creativity, is in that collision of ideas from people that come from different backgrounds. So that's what we try to do at C2, both from bringing people internationally to Montreal, but also having a place where we have the very emergent artists have a place as much as Cirque du Soleil for the arts, or startups have a place even on our main stage as much as the celebrities that you've seen on there. One of my favorite stories, there's a young company in Montreal called ProVendor. Again, they're in the food industry, where they link produce by farmers, especially specialty farmers, directly with chefs who might want to have that on their table. So they're bypassing the production line. 2-3 years ago, they were at C2 Montreal as one of the startup competitions, when they come in and they're all like, wow, and they're trying to meet people and grow. And 2 years later, they were asked to give a conference on our main stage, which when I contacted Catherine, who's the founder, and I asked him, would you like to deliver a talk at C2? He wrote back, and I kid you not, he said, wow, I feel like Kennedy just called and asked me if I wanted to go to the moon. And which was a huge compliment, but it felt like there is no reason why in the space of 2 years you can't go from being the underdog that's being brought in through one of these competitions to ensure representativity to being the star of the show. So it's really the message I leave you with, and I thank you all very much for your time. Thank you.
So this is not my typical crowd. Except maybe for C2, I guess. C2 is like my Christmas, by the way, because I deal a lot in bringing creativity to companies that are not like Cirque du Soleil, that are like built manufacturing equipment and stuff like that. And so C2, oh, I need to speak here, I'm told. Sorry, here we go. So like I said, C2 is kind of my Christmas because I meet a lot of companies that are like, this is really cool, but I'm not Cirque du Soleil. I can't make this work. And so a lot of what I do is work with these companies and try to bring creativity back in their business model. And I wanted to share some of those stories that are based on this. In terms of what I've done in the past, I've worked in companies like Bombardier, Nortel Networks, a lot of these manufacturers. And then at some point in my career, I made a switch and I went to work for Mega Bloks. And then I started making toys and stuff like that. And that became, that I was amazed that was an actual job. Like I was working with, Power Rangers and stuff like that. And that was really, I wasn't saving the world. It was kind of an awkward thing to explain to my mom, like I'm working with toys all day. And then I made a move to video games when I went to work for Electronic Arts. And at some point when I left and I decided to create Half Serious, part of what I wanted to do is just go back to these older companies that I used to work for and say, look at everything that I learned about creativity, how do I bring this back? And it was actually extremely difficult. And in the last 5 years, I've learned a lot. And some of these things that I wanted to share with you is basically, this is my conviction, is that organizations that master empathy will ultimately be the winners. And the reason I say this, and you'll see the link with creativity, basically the first time that this really became a reality for me was I was working with a financial institution. And we wanted to create a website for people that were maybe 25 years old and they were going to buy their first house. And there's an argument about the fact that should we have like interesting, maybe /funny videos because, young adults like things that are like sarcasm and stuff like that. Should we build the site for this? Or should we have a tool that allows you to just plug in the house that you want and it kind of gives you what that's going to amount to in terms of your monthly budget? And because some people were saying, well, this generation is a tinkering generation. They want to play around with the tools immediately. And the first thing I realized is nobody in this room was 25 years old. Like we were all having this conversation, but nobody had really any clear idea. And we were all basing this on our biases and our sort of expectation of what these people, thought reality looked like. So I said, why don't we just go talk to a couple of 25-year-olds, right? We're going to find out. The first reflex in a large corporation is to say, okay, we'll send a survey, right? So a survey is basically when you have an idea that something is going on and you want to achieve some sort of granularity, but when you're really exploring and you don't know what you're looking for, you can't go on a survey. You need to actually go out and talk to people and ask them what their stories are. And so the second reflex is, well, that's not our job. That's the PR department's job. We're not allowed to go and talk to people. Like, you're telling me that all 25-year-olds, you're not allowed to talk to them because they're the property of your PR department? That doesn't make any sense. So at some point, this is a struggle that I deal with pretty much everywhere that I work. Like, we're not allowed to actually go out and talk to people. So long story short, what we ended up discovering is that none of these 25-year-olds actually had a budget. So even if you tell them this amounts to $800 a month, they have no idea if they can afford it. So we ended up building the whole site based on build your budget. Now it was a little bit of a joke of this is like being an adult 101 budget. And once you have your budget, it kind of gives you, this is the space that you have for your mortgage, and therefore you should be shopping for houses between this and this. And so using empathy, really being able to see the world through the eyes of the people we're trying to create a solution for, really allowed us to hit the nail on the head. And that's basically been the pattern from there. My latest client does this, right? So basically what they do is they they actually don't do this. What they do is, this is an electrical transformer for transportation. And what that client does is actually they sample the oil in there and they look for suspended gases. So that's pretty far from Cirque du Soleil or Sidley, right? But the problem is last year or 2 years ago, they spent over $2 million on a research project for a new product. And in the end, when they went to the market with it, they ended up discovering that nobody actually wanted that, right? Even if you're like a purely R&D shop and you invest in all these things, if you really don't kind of understand what these people are looking for, you might be spending a lot of money for nothing, right? And so it's again based on empathy. I've applied this to banking, retail, software development. It always comes out to the same thing. Your ability to see your company or what you do from the perspective of people looking in will define your ability to ultimately win. So this is our motto. Empathy is the ultimate superpower, is what we tell our employees, is what we tell our clients, is really what we get into. We're actually did a little side project with Séverine at la Chambre de Commerce. So not sure that's going to be going forward, but it was an interesting talk. And so empathy, being used to create better everything, better hospitals. I've worked with a small, I don't want to say hospital, a small clinic in northern Vermont. And what they're looking for at first is how to improve the stay of mothers that just gave birth. And at first, what they ended up doing is asking for suggestions from them, right? So you get suggestions and you get things like, I'm trying to rest, please stop making noise. But you can't do that. You're running a hospital or you're running a clinic. So asking questions or asking for ideas and suggestions from your customer is actually kind of a terrible idea. What you're trying to do is really build empathy for them. And so you're trying to look past that idea and you're saying, well, why are you asking that? You're asking that because you're trying to rest. And in the end, what we ended up doing is we realized that the nurses and the people that are in charge of maintenance wouldn't synchronize. So there would be someone in your room every 20, 30 minutes. And so in the end, what we ended up doing is just bunching those things together so they would travel. So you go there, but then we leave you alone for about 3 or 4 hours. So asking for ideas is not the same as building empathy. Building empathy is really what you're trying to do. Empathy is design food. It's good. We were talking about creativity a lot. I think design is a better frame to understand creativity. Creativity is very scary for businesses. A lot of times I actually don't use that word, and that's actually problem number one, right? When I start talking to companies about creativity, it's extremely scary. And it's, I've come to understand why that was. Is because a lot of times companies are successful because they're able to understand some sort of value creation practice that they're doing, and then they start bringing in a lot of efficiencies, right? They become very efficient, and then the processes come into place, and it's a good thing. If my mouse breaks down, I don't want someone to say, well, what is a mouse? Just give me a new mouse. That's the process. Just follow the process, right? Some things need to be just optimized and we follow them through. But at some point when you want to start re-envisioning the future or starting to bring in creativity, it's scary because it disturbs, right? So the first thing that I use is something that's called the 3 Horizon model. And it's a model that's been popularized by McKinsey, actually. And what's really interesting is that H1 is what you're doing now, is the products that you're doing now, you're selling it to the people that are actually buying it now. And at some point, the value creation of H1 is going to plateau for market reasons. Something is going on. There's a new competitor. Things are changing, and at some point, you're going to run out of H1. If you're in the digital space, that might be 6 months to a year. If you're in a hardware manufacturer, it might be 5 to 10 years, right? But at some point, that's going to plateau, and you need to start thinking about what is going to replace that. Well, the idea of being able to explain this from the start and to say, we're going to be having an H2 conversation starts kind of calming everybody down. We're talking about something that's going to happen somewhere in the future, and we're not talking about disturbing whatever we're doing now. And that has a lot to do with, bringing peace to the overall conversation. So when you're thinking of H1, you're thinking about return on investment. You're thinking about, predictability. You want things to be safe and to de-risk. Whenever you're thinking about H2, you have an entrepreneur's mindset. You're trying to see what is the new trend, where is this going, how could we build a prototype to start exploring if there's an avenue for that. And what happens is at the beginning, if you're looking at the prototype that you've built for H2, it's going to be incredibly inefficient because it's brand new. It has a lot of problems with it. And if you're looking at it with the lens of an H1, it looks like a really expensive step backwards. And so a lot of the companies that I work with, the biggest struggle is to keep on investing, stay on it until we can build some efficiencies into it and it can start being the new revenue generator. So the 3 Horizon model is something that I'm using every time now. I usually bring this as an example. 70% of their time that Google is, or at least the executives are spending on the current business, 20% to something that is not in the current business, but it's sort of related to their current business in an interesting way, and then 10% on the real like future value stuff. What I think is interesting about what they do, and I've heard a similar story with Disney, is they have separate rooms for that. So there's a, you know, you sort of get a feeling that we haven't seen the H2 room in a long time. That kind of gives you an internal signal that maybe I need to spend a little bit more time there. Unfortunately, a lot of people that I work with don't have all these rooms to spare. Like they're not going to say, here's a room that we're going to use 20% of the time. That's not going to fly, right? So using a cheap little trick is whenever I start working with a new client, we build these boxes that we call H2 boxes. And we fill it with things like, you know, design thinking tools and value creation design and stuff like that. We pack it in, and what we tell them is as soon as this box is in a room, this becomes an H2 room, right? So the box takes control of that room. And so that makes everybody laugh, especially if you're talking with like older engineers and they're like, oh, this, you know, this is, you know, the H2 box just took control of this room. The second thing is ideas are overrated. A lot of companies that I start working with have an idea management system, right? And the ideas come from employees or whatever. And it's, you know, I usually call these things disappointment systems because 90% of these ideas that come in are probably not realistic. They're, you know, ideas, the nature of an idea is that you have it and then you rethink it and then you try it and it breaks and then you have another idea. But if you just start collecting ideas from your customers and your employees, a lot of times these can be used to feed something, but they're not going to be materialized. So 90% or 95% of what's going to be put in there is actually not going to come out as the way that it came in. And also, if you think of a creative process, an idea is just sort of an intermediate step. At some point, you're exploring. At some point, you're discovering certain patterns that you think are interesting. You're generating tons of ideas. You test a few of them. Some of them, you know, survive. And the idea is sort of something that happens in the middle. But for some reason in our management culture, ideas have become this thing that kind of people seem to think that they're valuable, but they're really not. So this is my nightmare. This is pretty much how everything starts every time, right? And my trick here is to just use a framework. I have a certain preference for design thinking because it's very loose, but at the same time, it sort of says what it says, right? At first, you don't really know. In a complex problem, not only do you not know what the solution is, the problem is not even that clear, right? So you need to have a little bit of an exploration phase that they call empathize, where you spend time. I did a little project with the Montreal airport, and that was a lot of fun because you go down on the you know, to talk to passengers and you tell them, tell me the story of your worst time in an airport. Man, everybody has a freaking good story. People have good stories. And so, you know, the project with the Montreal airport started with, we need an app. All right, so why do you need an app? Well, we don't know, but it needs to monetize. Okay, you know, what problem are we trying to solve? It's not clear, but, you know, our CEO wants an app. All right, okay, so we're going to go on the floor, we're going to talk to people, and at some point, once I started collecting a lot of these stories, the sort of common thread or a pattern that I thought was interesting was everybody was complaining about this time, that they had a lot of time, but they couldn't rest because there's nowhere that's comfortable to rest. When you rest, you're scared that you're going to actually miss your flight. You're scared that you're going to get your laptop stolen. And so we came back and we said, well, an interesting prototype that we could test is we could go out and buy a couple of like deluxe leaning chairs from that you see in a spa or something like that. We could have someone that collects your $5. We let you rest. We take care of your bag. We'll wake you at the right time, right? Where's the app? I don't know. There's no app. I haven't seen a need for an app. So that was an uncomfortable conversation because when we said there's nothing points to an app. So I don't know where this comes from. It's probably political, and so they're still thinking about it. That was before the summer, so they gave themselves a summer to think about it. I think they're still going to do it because, you know, an airport needs an app, I guess. So that's a framework that I use. I love to use things like service design. You notice that everything ends with design here. And I'm an engineer by trade, by the way. But kind of see myself more as a design thinker now, because what I think is interesting is you might build a really sophisticated piece of something, you put it in the hands of someone, and it's not actually solving their problem. You've created nothing, right? So at some point, I became more passionate about the design aspect of solving problems. And that's it. These are my 3 points. You know, create with empathy. Set the mood. Set the mood is extremely important. Just make sure that we're understanding that now we're going to be in that mood, and it's not a danger to our current way of doing things. We're just in a different place. And then have a framework to take people from empathy to business. And that's it. Thank you.
I'm going to be sitting the whole time. People who know me know this is not my usual way of conferencing. I have many excuses before I start. The first one is I was giving another conference this morning. I gave a 1-hour lecture at CNW, Canada Newswire. I'm a bit tired, so that's a good reason. But moreover, I must say I've been out of academia for about 4 years now. I started a company called F&Co with my former partner Louis-Félix Pinette, and now I just launched a new company called FG8. And so I've been out of academia for some time now, and receiving an invitation from a prestigious professor like Diane Gabriel to talk in this venue, I thought maybe I should make an effort and read what's being written right now in academia, and maybe give a lecture that's a little bit more, say, academic. And so I was reminded of my better years of doing my master's and PhD, where you would basically address an audience reading a paper or a variation of a paper in which you would express your ideas and open them for discussions. So I did exactly that. I've been working on this piece. It's about a 10-minute read, if you want. And so I'll be trying to put emphasis and talk with my hands, but I'll basically be sitting and reading a text to you. So I'm sorry about that. If you want, I can give the full-out performance at a later occasion. You can invite me in your business or in your whatever. I was asked the question, can we make cities more creative? And before I address the question, I wanted to provide a little bit of context. About the same time last year, I was asked by Montreal-based magazine Info Presse whether I was in favor or against a thing called native advertising. It's basically a phenomenon where newspapers take companies' content and they pass it off as original journalism. So again, Info Presse asked me to write a paper about whether I was in favor or against native advertising. And as you know, native advertising is a phenomenon where newspapers take companies' content and pass it off as original journalism. And what struck me is that out of a dozen contributors, I was the only one to be against this phenomenon. It's interesting to look at the narrative that promoters of such phenomena use to describe why they would favor such journalistic malpractice. In the vast majority of cases, the reasoning is more or less because it works. And so with the creative city, the arguments that we hear the most often are because it works. Much has been written and much has been said, all in the name of the concept, because it yields results, we should care about the creative city. So when people ask me, can we make cities more creative? My answer is always, who's asking? I've identified 4 types of people who tend to ask more than others. They are business leaders, policymakers, academics, and creatives. As it emerges from most of Richard Florida's writings, the creative city is actually a place in economics, for me, as a PhD, as a doctor in economics, is a place of exclusion, is a place of rivalry, it's a place of decreasing marginal returns, and it's a place of competition for limited resources. We more or less talk about the creative city instead of something else, right? So in a nutshell, it's the complete opposite of what we economists have defined as an economy of knowledge, which is characterized by non-rival, non-exclusion, increasing marginal returns, and non-competition for scarce resources. The notion of creative class that was defined by Florida even brings back the spectrum of class war, something most of us thought extinct since the more or less death of communism in 1989. And so while it's common in academic circles to criticize the work of Florida, it's very common and popular to criticize Florida, we have to admit that this man has done more for the advancement of the concept than any other single author in the field. So he's really a central figure still to this day, and despite all of the criticism, he's really the man of reference. I found a very interesting 2013 piece from Markham Millis, who writes, the creative city is not a socially coherent, But in contrast to the modernist city of public well-being, it's a socially divisive city in which the culture as the arts is privileged over culture as the articulation of shared values in everyday life. For the creative city to exist as a pragmatic concept, one needs to be able to point at it, to say, this is creative. And so in doing so, it's much easier to look at an art gallery and a video game company like Ubisoft than to evoke the myriad interactions between citizens that make up culture in the emerging sense, culture in the everyday sense. In fact, whether you're talking to a business leader, a policymaker, an academic, or a creative, most will advance a view of the creative city that is self-serving, in line with their own objectives. Who among us has surveyed the homeless people of Hochelaga in search of a creative city? I say, I haven't, but I'm starting to think that maybe I should. So creative cities. In light of years of research into creative processes and creative minds, here's what a creative city would actually look like. First, it would be a place of mixed infrastructure that would combine residential, commercial, and light industrial manufacturing capacities. Yet the majority of the current urban development we see is the exact opposite of that. It prescribes uses for everything. And what we end up with are metro supermarkets, Pharmaprix, and an occasional bar that serves $15 cocktails. Second, a creative city is a place of affordable rent so that all social classes can mix, contribute, and develop a panopticon from which to view the world. We have the chance in Montreal of hosting the most important density of artists per square kilometers in Canada. I'm moving to this neighborhood next week, Le Plateau, but not for long. Much in the same way that we have seen in Paris an exodus of creatives in favor of socialists and tourists, the same phenomenon is going to happen here. Rents are rising, the purchase price is rising as well. Out of love for the authenticity of these neighborhoods, we chase authenticity away and replace it with American franchises and business offices. And that to me is a drama. Third and most importantly, a creative city needs space. Public space, open space, and free space. Yet when an urban planner or a real estate developer sees an empty lot, he sees nothing but an opportunity to fill, to place something instead of nothing. I grew up in a small city outside of Ottawa. It's called Elmer. It doesn't exist anymore. It was merged with Gatineau, whatever. And in this city, in Elmer, you could roam for an hour long in rough patches of mud and sand and bushes. Now it's been replaced by 10,000 clones of the same house, the same car, probably a Honda Civic, and in many ways, the same people. Where will the kids of tomorrow learn to play, learn this unstructured art of play? Urban sprawl is not just a problem for the suburbs, it's also a problem for the creative city. We're sprawling emptiness. A few years ago, with my former partner Louis-Félix Binet, I wrote a manifesto. It was called On Emptiness. I'll read from it just for a brief moment. Let the void be manifest. A cliff, a precipice, the dark of night, a blank page, an empty lot. Emptiness is scary. It paralyzes, transfixes, petrifies. Still, the absence of emptiness paralyzes just as much. Fullness, overflow, and above all, the thirst to fill everything are pests of modern society. A creative city knows no methodology. It isn't something you organize. It kind of organizes itself. You don't point to an area and say, this is where creativity will happen. It never works that way, and it never will. My biggest fear at the moment is that Montreal is so enamored with its being creative that it's starting to decide what is and what isn't creative, and is forgetting to just let it be. The most groundbreaking ideas seldom appears where you're looking for them. It's not just a motto, it's a historical fact. The good ideas arrive when you're in the restroom. What you need is not method, but serendipity, more restrooms. You need piracy, rebellion, chaos, messiness. Yet, when our children take to the streets, their face painted and their signs up on wooden sticks, what do? We strike them, we fine them, and we put them in jail. To be honest, I was much in favor of a modest hike in tuition fees. Yet, when a society feels the need to cut out everything that exceeds the margins, what kind of creativity do you expect to find? My thinking is that cities are not creative. That is, unless their public administration suddenly turns into a Google-like startup, but forces to admit that there's much work left to be done here in Montreal. And we have a great mayor, we have a great team at the municipal council, but change takes time. It will take a lot of time to change the bureaucracy. Those who know me know that my PhD thesis was entitled The Creative Bureaucracy. I have studied this phenomenon for 5, 6, 7 years. It will not take years, it will take decades to change the municipal administration. So if you want to talk about the creative city with a capital C, we cannot be impatient. We cannot expect results next month. I very much like the point made by Professor Richard Schirmer from McGill University. You might know him. When we talk about the creative city, we look at end results and we infer a cause. We say, this is new. It came from this place. This place must be creative. But the correlation may be not happening in this sense. In fact, let's consider an alternate hypothesis. Cities are not creative. What we see is nothing but the result of cities as great marketing accelerators for good ideas. Consider this. Alexandra Larouche, she's a 22-year-old YouTuber from Victoriaville. She's got 150,000 YouTube subscribers. That's much more than I have. She makes a living posting lifestyle videos online twice a week. She makes a lot of money, probably more than I do, actually. And as her career flourishes, she's starting to think next steps. What does she do? Obviously, she moves to the plateau. Obviously. Yet to her, it's not a matter of whether Montreal is a creative city or not. Very few people really think the world that way. Maybe we do, but I mean, in the real world out there, nobody says, I'll move to this place because it's a creative city. For Alexandra and thousands of other young creators like her, it's a matter of finding an agent. It's a matter of finding like-minded people or clients or brands that she can address without having to drive for an hour and a half. Maybe she's looking for a latte at the Starbucks, you know? This is why she moves to the plateau and not because it's a creative city and branded as such. And the same goes for many cities. The same goes for Brazzaville or Beijing or Padilla or Vienna or even Trois-Rivières. I mean, if you live in Shawinigan or some small city in the suburb, you probably move downtown Shawinigan because this is where the stuff is happening in this area of the world. In each case, cities draw people from the periphery to the center, and it's in the center that they become. They become something, they become known, they achieve something in the center. So the city per se is not creative. It only draws the creative people to come there and say, here I can be creative because of the proximity, because of the activities, because of the lattes at the Starbucks. I like Starbucks. Cities are nothing but large communities of practice. Yet we feel the urge to categorize cities as such. We build rankings, and I've had a little split with Marie-Josée a couple of months ago about city rankings. You'll remember, I'll send you the article. We build rankings from creative to innovative to livable cities. Did you know that the Livable Cities Index was developed for expats to designate cities where precisely nothing ever happens? Places where executives that earn quite a lot of money can go and do their work without ever being threatened, bothered, or presented with diverging views. What kind of place is this? Who wants to live in a place like that? Executives, perhaps, but not me and not you. The Economist recently wrote a little blog post in which they called this phenomenon Torporville. And so they wrote of the city known as the Big Apple. Today, talking about New York, the streets feel safe, and the once dysfunctional underground systems seems to work as well as any metro in any big city. Both above and below ground, the city has become, not to put a fine point to it, pleasant. This is progress, surely. Yet for the visitor raised on the romance of New York, just a little disappointing. An acquaintance, an architect who moved from London to the meat-packing district 10 years ago in search of thrills, bemoaned New York's gentrification. Wanting to make a city more creative, and the quote is over now, we should wonder why anyone would want to do such a thing. Is it for the money? Is it for the fame? Or for creativity itself? And then one asks, how much creativity is enough? Perhaps it's time we revisited creativity as a means rather than an end. And so when someone wonders whether we can make their city or their neighborhood more creative, the answer should always be, who's asking? And that's it.
So, who are we?
Who are we?
Well, we've been presented a little bit. We're good friends that know each other since 6 years, and as I mentioned, we're recently started working on a new exciting project called Atelier du Havre. So we've just changed the name. It's brand new, so I guess nobody here have heard about it, and it's totally normal.
Yeah.
So
what's your passion?
All right, I'm Phil. I'm very passionate about art, creativity, installations, and at one moment in my life, I had great friends that were artists and had tons of great works to showcase, but didn't really know how to do it. So I decided I'd help them out and organize events and help them creating content. So I've been working with this that I called Massive Art for now 7 years, and it's been a very great journey, great adventure. So I guess art, installations, and design, and any creative output is my passion. What about you, Hélène?
Yeah, I'm passionate about emergent practices, bringing people together to work together in a creative and collaborative way. So I'm interested in co-working space, Fab Lab, and any kind of space where people and organization can develop their human being. And that's, yeah, you present the Massive Art, so I should present maybe the Carrefour de la Création.
Go ahead if you want to.
Yeah? Or you want to go back in Massive Art?
Well, one thing that I think we should say that's funny is I met Hélène for the first time, maybe it was 6 years ago, right? I was working at the time at Journée de la Culture, which we mentioned before. And I got this mention of, there were so many activities at Journée de la Culture. I was kind of in charge of doing this map, right? Because there was 150 activities to do, and you couldn't really, like, what should I do in this area where there's tons of great artists to discover? So that's when I encountered Hélène. She was one of the 150 people I had to contact and organize together. And she was having Chargée des Artistes, which is a super nice, actually, workspace for artists in Montreal. So that's how we met. And it's funny that today, 6 years after, we're working together on an artist residency project. So it's kind of it's a fun journey. And at the time, Massive Art was very small. It was just being founded in 2009. And today, Massive Art is 15 people working full-time. We are having events in both Montreal and Paris. And we just announced a collaboration with TÉLUQ, which is a company that looks like what we do in Montreal, but in Europe. And we are starting to do exchanges like this, which is very fun. And basically what we do is we produce events for corporations in which we, instead of hiring classic, I don't know, sofas or whatever to be part of the event, we hire artists, because it's one of the great ways you can, of course, you can collect art, but you can also make an artist work for your event. And it creates those really unique events that are much appreciated from the public afterwards, and benefits and create values for corporations. So that's our main service, I'd say. And then sometimes we're not being asked for the whole event, but maybe a smaller part. Nadia has left, but we've been involved in C2 Montreal a lot. Having artists imagine how we could see data, or like how we could materialize some quotes in the events. So this is really, this content creation is really where we connect the business and the artist, which often doesn't speak the same languages, right? Businesses have commercial objectives, artists have like basically like artistic issues, and they have to get on the same page in order to do a project. So that's basically where our group interferes, and where we can help connect the creator and the artist to create values that benefits both of the parties. So that's Massive Art in a nutshell.
Okay, now what is Carrefour de la Création, or Creative Crossroad? It's founded by Réseau, which is the Regroupement économique et social du Sud-Ouest. Should I translate it as a social and economic community? Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And also by the citizen and artists in the southwest of Montreal. So it was found to support creativity in this neighborhood, to support also the sharing economy or collaborative economy. It's just two terms for the same thing. And by developing, protecting, and animated creative and collaborative space, to provide a proximity, service proximity for the citizen, and also to participate in this Montréal culturel. So
Yeah, it's very fun actually that we've been I've been listening all morning, and I was very interested in what people said, and often we got this question back of Montreal being a cheap place for artists, and we just had mentioned where it's not so true anymore, and it will change and all that. And so we think it's very important to maintain those accessible space in order to artists to create. And there was a lot of mention as well as the places of creativity in a city. And you mentioned first thing you need is spaces, and that is very true. And most of the artists we work with always have space issues and are migrating from richer districts to being repulsed further and further in the city. But being in the center of action is very important for some creators in order to be able to connect with other artists, connect with businesses, connect with public funds. So we think it's very important and to have this, and we're happy to present this concrete project where it really illustrates the importance of creativity in a city. Especially in this area. So basically, so Hélène and me met recently. Carrefour La Création, like she mentioned, has these objectives of keeping artists safe, let's say it like this, in the Sud-Ouest area of Montreal. And this project actually is a super, has this 10 years. I just got in the project, so I'm very excited, as you can see. But it's actually been on, incubating for 10 years in the Sud-Ouest. And that is very something I didn't even know. Because there's always been this issue of, how Sud-West is where there was the whole industrial revolution, and there's this leftover where landmarks are huge buildings and industrial heritage. So there's not so much space. It's really it's really typical of the buildings where the artists would live and create. But for a reason, in the Sud-West, there was not so many artists having studios and all that.
Not now. Before, yes, but because the rent rise and a lot of luxury condo coming near the Canal Lachine, a lot of artists left the space. So what's happened when creative people left the living area? What happened? All the vitality of the environment left with them. So here's the opportunity with a new. Well, not new land, but new empty space. So let's see where it is. You're having the Canal Lachine at the bottom, and the Ottawa Street, and it's corner Guy Street. So it's really close to downtown. Huh? And this whole area before it was the Post Canada office, Centre de Triage. And the Government of Canada decide to remove this infrastructure. So here's the opportunity with an empty space. It's 1 million foot square available now to rebuild and do something. So as the citizen, all the organization and the réseau were participating on what we want with this space. So the City of Montreal and the Canadian government have a process to explore as a PPU. Well, it's a project particulier d'urbanisme. So it's end up. We want low-rent apartment. We want some space for the family, and now it's ended up with luxury condo and a lot of high price things. So here's where you see the circle. It's and the one on the right is the social project of this sector.
So yeah, for 10 years, artists of the area have been asking for a space in which to create, and so they turned to Réseau, where Hélène is really linked, as she mentioned before. And then Réseau said, we have this amazing, huge project of condos that's happening right on the shore of Canal, and it would really be interesting to have this social mixity and have different things than just condos, right, in the building. So Hélène saw an opportunity there and founded Carrefour La Création with some friends and artists, and started you know, they're talking to people and saying, hey, in your project, there should be a space that is for art. And because all of the area is being transformed in condos and all that, and people are getting scared that there's not going to be any living space in order just to hang out. And also space that are affordable, because this is like this very high-end area of the city. So what we've decided to do is take a 14,000 square feet place at the very first level of this huge 9 towers project. So in one of those towers, we want to do what I call the brain gym. You know how condos have all access to a gym? Well, now what we want to do is make people sure they can train their creativity and their brain in our very specific gym. So what we want to do is create this creative co-working space that's very
for artists.
For artists and creators and designers. We are mixing both design and cultural aspects of your presentation out there. And this particular area of the city is now branded as Quartier d'Innovation. So what we did is we went and see Damien Silas, which is coming, I think, in a few moments. And we said, Damien, this is an amazing opportunity for Montreal to have this very first center of art and culture and design that is centered on innovative practices. So like we can find in Tokyo or even in Helsinki, some places are focused on what are cutting edge practices in art and design right now. And this is something Montreal didn't really have for now, something kind of to have an horizon on what's going on outside, what's going on in the city that is very innovative. So we want to do that in that space called Les Ateliers du Havre.
I just want to mention in this project, there is a lot of partners. Us, for sure, with Massive Art and Carrefour La Création. And Bâtir son quartier, who will develop the 232 low-rent apartment. SHDM, Société d'Habitation et de Développement de Montréal, will develop 80 condos for family. So that's what you see in the picture over there. Huh? It's 3-4 building. We designed it with Edifica architecture, well known for the planetarium and a lot of things in Montreal. I would like to mention Edifica because we developed this space over there. When we're talking about open and collaborative space for artists and the public, with Edifica, we're really working with the design to really open the space and be sure the artistic work is not confined in the space. Okay, so we should run a bit.
One of our main challenges, I guess, was that artists usually don't like new stuff, right? They like old factories with a lot of history and charm and all that, and that's going to be a brand new condo project. So lots of my artist friends are like, well, Phil, this is very too skeptical for me. I can't work in those too clean conditions. This is too modern for me. So we were like, oh, Lee, we have to do something to make this new space clean, like attracting for artists. And we found that having an open space where people can break walls, get a bigger space, smaller studio for a smaller project, share tools, is the solution maybe that we think is going to work to bring back this attractiveness for artists.
And there will be 300 citizen or family living there. So they need to have a space where they can meet and share. So that will be this concept of Fab Lab and Cafe. So not a full Fab Lab, but a space where you can find a machine and things where you can create some little thing and having a cafe at the same time and meeting your neighborhood. And it will be the only space like that in this whole area. So we hope this social mixity with the luxury condo and this apartment, they will have a space where they can meet. And so what's the other? The modular space we developed with Edifica based on a lot of studios. Stanford University who really developed this kind of modular space. Here's the one of example of atelier artist studio, really movable and modular.
Some interesting numbers, maybe. This project will be able to have 40 different artists working full-time on the building. So it's very nice. We're very happy about that. For the new space for artists. It's a $3.2 million project. So if you guys have any spare change, we're totally in.
That's the price for the Lulu space, the creative space. For sure, this whole project is $70 million. So with the
well, our partial art space is a smaller part of it. There's over 30 partners already. The project is basically in Montreal. There's this whole movement of proudness, and we want to be proud of Montreal. So we've launched this Je vois Montréal, which was an initiative of people getting together and organizing great stuff for our city.
Doing the city of commerce. And,
an excellent initiative. Yeah. So we're very happy to be one of the 40 projects that is going to be part of Je fais Montréal, which is after dreaming about our ideal Montreal, let's now do it. So that's why I'm saying this is a very concrete application of how creativity can be old space in a city. And we were thrilled to share it with you because, it's very concrete.
Yeah. So, merci. Thank you so much.
Thank you all, guys.